In tonight's mystery, danger stirs beneath the calm surface long before anyone notices the first crack in the case. Step closer, listen close, the truth is already moving. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the girl who left a note for Fritz. The moment I stepped into the dining room that morning, the sun hadn't quite made up its mind about Manhattan, and neither had I. But the folded piece of paper sitting on Fritz's breakfast tray had already cast its vote. It perched there like a smug little maitre d', announcing trouble before anyone asked for the menu. Fritz stood beside it, pale as whipped egg whites, his hands gripping his apron the way a drowning man hangs onto driftwood. That alone was enough to make me halt mid-stride. Fritz is a steady man, sturdier than the heron's suspension, calmer than Wolfe before lunch, and seeing him rattled puts a kink in the day's track. I gave him a once-over. Something upsetting the morning specials, I asked, or did Wolfe finally declare butter a controlled substance? Archie, he whispered, not even rising to the bait. Please, read it. Now, when a grown man looks at me like a kid terrified of what's under his bed, I pay attention. I reached for the note. Black ink, slanted, hurried. 2 lines, 1 shove. Help me before he does. No signature, no address, no pleasantries. If the writer had included a little heart or a lipstick kiss, I'd have accused Fritz of a secret admirer. As it was, it hit harder than a frying pan. Well, I muttered, I'll say this. Your fan club has dramatic flair. Archie, that one word from Fritz had more steel in it than the knives in his kitchen. I clamped my wisecrack shut. His eyes, usually soft with culinary generosity, were tight with worry. He swallowed. She came early, very early. A girl, no older than 22, perhaps 23. She wore a blue coat, good fabric. Not rich, but good. She rang the bell, and when I opened the door, she said she needed to give me something. She would not tell me her name. She left the note and ran. Ran, I echoed. Not walked? Ran, Fritz confirmed, toward West 35th. That was plenty to chew. Women didn't leave cryptic pleas for help on breakfast trays because they were behind on rent. And they didn't choose Fritz as their emergency contact unless something had hit the panic button hard enough to crack it. When exactly? I asked. 20 minutes ago, before I began setting the table. Now, if you've ever seen Fritz confess to misplacing a basil leaf, you've seen shaky. But this was different. He wasn't embarrassed, he was downright frightened for the girl. And if someone could scare Fritz, I made a mental note to tread lightly. I lifted the note again and caught a faint scent, almond flour, rich and sweet with the undertone of something fancier than home baking. Pastry cream, lightly scorched. The kind found in hotel kitchens where chefs wear hats like medieval parapets and treat ovens like altars. Fritz, I said, did her coat happen to smell like she'd survived an explosion in a patisserie? He blinked. I noticed flour, yes, on the sleeve. There we were, a girl in a good coat carrying panic and pastry dust. And right on cue, the faint whir of the elevator floated from the hallway. Wolfe was descending from his orchid rooms. Orchid hours were sacred, etched in stone, framed in gold, untouchable unless the world was ending or Kramer had a warrant freshly ironed. If Wolfe was coming down early, something had ruffled a petal. The elevator doors slid open, and out he came, vast, composed, and wearing the expression of a man whose morning serenity had been vandalized. His eyes travelled from Fritz's face to the note in my hand. "What is this?" he demanded, voice as level as a surveyor's tool but carrying weight enough to level mountains. I presented the note like a magician revealing a poisoned rabbit. Special delivery. For Fritz, no less. Signed, sealed, and distressed. Wolfe took it, read it once, and frowned. When Wolfe frowns at breakfast, angels weep. "Confound it," he muttered, which for him was equivalent to another man throwing furniture. He turned to Fritz. "Explain." Fritz repeated his account, word for word, down to the detail about the coat. Wolfe watched him as if gauging the heat of a simmering stock. When Fritz finished, Wolfe released a slow breath. "A supplicant. Frightened," he said. "And she chose you. Curious." Curious was Wolfe's speak, for this is a complication I did not order, and I want to return it. I cleared my throat. "She might work in a hotel kitchen. Expensive pastry flour, almond, creme brulee habit, that kind of thing. Wolfe shot me a look. Archie, you are speculating. That's true, I admitted, but I'm doing it stylishly. Fritz interjected, voice hushed. Mr. Wolfe, she was so afraid I could not turn her away. Wolfe softened minutely. Only someone who lived with him could spot it. A fractional relaxing of the jaw, a subtle shift of breath. You did as your conscience required. Coming from Wolfe, that was a pat on the shoulder and a warm cup of cocoa. He handed the note back to me. Archie, you will canvass the vicinity, discreetly. We must ascertain who she is and what danger pursues her. Right after breakfast? I asked. It is not yet 1 o'clock, Wolfe said pointedly. Fritz will announce when the meal is ready. Until then, you may work. In other words, I had until lunchtime to prevent the collapse of civilization. After 1 o'clock, hunger trumped homicide. I folded the note and pocketed it. Any particular instructions? Yes, Wolfe said. Do not assume. Do not invent. Observe. That's my second favourite hobby. And your first? Annoying you. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Phooey. He moved to his desk, lowering himself with the precision of a man settling onto a throne that had sued 12 chairs for inferior craftsmanship. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz, startled from worry, straightened automatically. Coffee, Wolfe commanded. Archie requires fortification before blundering into absurdities. I'll try to limit the blundering, I said. Do, Wolfe replied. It would please me. That, believe it or not, was Wolfe being affectionate. If he'd been any warmer, I'd have checked him for fever. Fritz brought the coffee, but lingered. Mr. Wolfe, the girl, you will help her. Wolfe looked up. There was no reluctance in his face, only calculation. I shall consider it, Fritz, when we know what help entails. Fritz bowed his head. Danke. When he left, Wolfe turned to me. If she sought you, I would dismiss it as some foolish dalliance, but she sought him. Fritz rarely inspires deception. Therefore, this is serious. Well, I said, I've been telling you for years I'm the frivolous one. You have demonstrated it repeatedly, Wolfe said dryly. I grinned. At least give me credit for consistency. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. You could practically hear the orchids sigh in jealousy. They loved being the morning's focus, and this little drama had stolen their spotlight. At 10:52, the dining room bell chimed, Fritz announcing breakfast with military timing. Wolfe rose. Investigate, he instructed. Report before lunch, but do not overexert yourself. I require you intact. That was Wolfe for be careful. I grabbed my coat. If Fritz starts getting mysterious women leaving him notes, I'm demanding a raise. Wolfe grunted, which could have meant anything from nonsense to, we'll discuss your salary when hell freezes over. As I stepped into the hall, Fritz reappeared at the doorway, offering a quiet, worried look. Please, find her. I intend to, I assured him. I'm fond of my breakfast appearing on time. Losing you would not only ruin meals, it'd ruin Wolfe. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I headed out the door into the stubborn Manhattan morning. The air tasted like cold bakery exhaust and cab fumes. Somewhere out there, a terrified girl in a blue coat was running from someone with enough menace to scribble doom into a folded note. And I had, until lunchtime, to find her. If you ever want to take the temperature of Manhattan before lunch, try chasing a terrified girl through its hotel kitchens. The city wakes up slow above ground, but below the lobby level, where ovens roar like dragons and chefs shout like drill sergeants, it's already hotter than noon in July. By the time I hit West 35th, the sidewalk smelled like a mixture of ambition and yesterday's rolls. I'd walked a block and a half when I realized I was following a trail no bloodhound would envy. Faint streaks of pastry flour, almond dust, and the kind of creme sugar scent that clings to aprons in fancy hotels. Whoever the girl was, she had either sprinted through 10 bakeries for fun, or spent her days somewhere that whipped egg whites into higher social standing than half the midtown population. I started with the nearest candidate, a French bakery run by a man whose moustache curled like accusatory punctuation marks. Inside, the counters gleamed with pastries priced above my weekly laundry bill. The pastry chef himself stood behind the register, shaping croissant dough with the grim focus of a man negotiating world peace. "You looking for a job or trouble?" he asked before I'd even said hello. "We have plenty of both." "Neither," I said. "I'm looking for a girl in a blue coat." "Congratulations," he sniffed. "Half the city owns one." She also smelled like almond flour. He paused. For a moment I thought he'd crack and confess to the Lindbergh kidnapping while he was at it, but instead he jabbed a flour-dusted finger toward the door. "Go ask at the hotels. They waste more almonds than I use in a week." He might have been sour as old vinegar, but he was right. A bakery wasn't where you found secret fear and expensive ingredients getting knocked off. You found that in a hotel kitchen where money, egos and soufflés rose at the same speed. The Imperial Hotel wasn't the tallest in Manhattan, but it was certainly the most self-satisfied. The lobby was a cathedral of polished marble, velvet carpets, and staff who moved like they'd been trained to glide instead of walk. A bellhop lounging by the elevators took one look at me and straightened up with a snap. Bellhops always think I'm there to hustle a guest or arrest one, and it keeps them refreshingly cooperative. "Morning," I said. "Seen a young woman in a blue coat run through here. About 22, maybe 23, scared stiff." His eyes flicked right and left like he was scanning for witnesses. "Lots of girls in coats." "This one was in a hurry, and she left a note in our dining room, which makes her my business." He hesitated, then pointed at the service corridor behind him. "She came through 20 minutes ago. Looked like she'd seen a ghost made of bills she couldn't pay." "Thanks. I'll send you a fruit basket when this is over." He scoffed. "Send cash instead." I headed back through the corridor. If the Imperial's lobby was royalty, the service hallways were the servants who kept the crowns polished. The smell hit me first: baking bread, caramelizing sugar, and the faint tang of steel ovens running hard. Chefs moved past like busy artillery units. If one of them shouted, "Incoming," I'd have ducked. At the double doors leading to the main kitchen, I paused. Kitchens in places like these have hierarchy deeper than a political machine. You can ask a maitre d' for your bill and get an eyebrow. Ask a pastry chef a question and you'll get a philosophy lecture or a cleaver. I pushed through the doors. Steam kissed my face, hot and sweet. Someone was tempering chocolate on a marble slab. Someone else was shouting about whipped cream's inability to read a clock. Pots clanged. A sugar thermometer narrowly missed my ear. "Excuse me," I called. The chef closest to me, a shaved-headed man with biceps like rising dough, turned with a ladle poised like a weapon. "No salesman," he barked. "I'm not selling, I'm looking." I flashed him my license. "Private detective." His face rearranged itself into something between curiosity and disdain. "We have no mysteries here," he announced. "Your tone is a mystery to me," I said. But more to the point, a girl in a blue coat came through here about 20 minutes ago, pastry flour on her sleeve, nervous. The big man's jaw tightened. "We all have troubles. Not my business." "Maybe not," I said, "but it might become mine." A younger assistant, hands covered in sugar dust, piped up. "She works upstairs," he said. "Cake decorator, Lila." "Lila what?" He shrugged. "Lila." The head chef shot him a glare that could curdle milk. "Back to work." I left them to their frosting wars and followed the assistant's pointed glance toward a narrow stairwell. The door at the top opened onto a quieter space, long counters, piping bags, cake stands, and the kind of silence that comes from concentrated artistry. There she was, blue coat draped over a chair, blonde hair escaping pins, hands trembling over a half-frosted wedding cake, and eyes that darted toward me the second she heard my footsteps. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said gently. "Private detective." She stepped back, nearly knocking over a bowl of fondant. I don't know anything," she stammered. "Fine," I said. "Let's start with what you didn't do. You didn't leave a note on Fritz Brenner's tray saying they'll help me before he does." Her breath caught. "I don't." "Relax," I said, raising both hands. "I'm not here to arrest you. I don't even have a badge. The closest thing I carry to one is charm." That got me half a smile, which was progress. "Sit," I said, "before you topple that cake and get charged with pastry homicide." She sat. I took the nearby stool. "Name?" "Lila Arden." "Occupation is obvious. Why'd you pick Fritz for your note?" Her eyes filled with tears she fought to hold back. "Because good men who cook know other good men. I didn't know where else to go." "You could have tried the police." No. She shook her head hard. No police. Because? Because someone at the hotel, someone dangerous, they're stealing expensive imported ingredients, falsifying the accounts, and when I found out, they warned me. Her voice trembled. They said accidents happen in big kitchens. That much was obvious. The ovens in this place were big enough to host town hall meetings. A theft ring? I mused. All that over vanilla beans. You don't understand, she whispered. Not just vanilla. European imports, thousands of dollars. It's a racket. And you stumbled on it? She nodded. Who threatened you? I don't know. I just heard the voice, but I saw... She buried her face in her hands. Go on, I said. What did you see? Her shoulders shook. Someone pushing a man into the proofing oven. That stopped me cold. Proofing ovens don't bake at full heat, but if someone wanted to make a point, trapping a man inside, one could do the job, or worse. Alive or dead? I asked. Alive, she whispered. He screamed. He tried to get out, and they held the door closed. My stomach tightened. Could you identify the man? She nodded. He wore a ring, a signet ring, emerald set, with a crest. She shuddered. He told someone earlier it belonged to Mrs. Vale's family, that she'd notice if anything happened to it. He was arguing earlier with the assistant manager, something about accounts not matching. Did you see the killer? No, just the sleeve. She squeezed her eyes shut. Grey, wool, maybe a coat. Grey wool. Half the managerial staff in Manhattan wore grey wool. Not helpful yet, but not nothing either. I leaned back. Lila, you came to the right place. We'll figure this out. She stared at me. We? I hesitated. Wolfe had told me not to commit us until we knew more, but telling a terrified girl to wait until Wolfe finished lunch wasn't on my menu. Yes, I said, we. Right on cue, my pocket buzzed. Wolfe, I answered. Goodwin. Report, Wolfe said. I found the girl, I said. Name's Lila Arden, works at the Imperial. Says she witnessed theft, fraud, and possibly murder by oven. A long silence, then. Archie. Yeah? Do not promise my services. I haven't promised anything, I said, which was true in the purely legal sense. I just told her we'd help. A sigh heavy enough to tilt the building groaned through the receiver. Archie, must you indulge your... Yes, I cut in, another sigh. Return before lunch. Do not allow the girl to be harmed. That was Wolfe speak for. I care that you're out there. Don't get yourself, or her, mangled. I'll bring her with me. No, not yet. Assess first. Fine. I hung up. Lila was watching me like I held the verdict for her entire future. I stood. Lila, I need you to stay here for now. Don't talk to anyone. Don't mention ovens, rings, or rackets. I'll be back. She grabbed my sleeve. Please, hurry. I'm fast, I said. Ask anyone who's chased me for rent. She didn't smile. As I headed toward the stairwell, the big pastry chef growled at me from across the room. She cause you trouble? Not yet. She will, he muttered. It was meant as a warning. It landed like a red herring. I took one last breath of sugar steam and metal clatter before stepping back into the hall. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that ruins breakfasts, that whatever Lila had seen wasn't the end of her trouble. It was just the warm-up. If there's one thing I've learned in this line of work, it's that the universe has a warped sense of humor when it comes to timing. I had just stepped back into the brownstone, intending to brief Wolfe on Lila's story before lunch, when the phone let out a buzz sharp enough to shave wood. I crossed the office, picked it up, and said in my most cordial tone, Nero Wolfe's residence, Archie Goodwin speaking. We're serving specials today. Trouble is the soup, murder the roast. A familiar growl slid through the receiver. Goodwin, knock off the patter. Inspector Kramer, I said. How delightful. Are we calling socially? Cut it, he snapped, though without real venom. You stay away from the Imperial Hotel. There's a homicide. Fresh. Hot. And I don't want you within 10 blocks. Well, you're out of luck, I said. I'm already within 10 blocks mentally. And physically you'll keep your hide put, he warned. The DA is already shaking branches. If Wolfe sticks his nose in, there'll be paper flying from here to Christmas. Inspector, I said, syrupy sweet, your confidence in my obedience is touching. Goodwin, he said, a little quieter. I mean it. Stay out. I don't need Wolfe complicating an active scene, and I don't need you meddling either. If I promise to be good? You'd be lying. He wasn't wrong. Good day, he said, and hung up before I could squeeze in even one insult disguised as a compliment. I stared at the phone a moment, letting the silence thicken. Then I strolled to the dining room, poured myself a tall ginger ale, my third favourite drink right after Milk and Mischief, and downed half of it. If Kramer didn't want me at the Imperial, that meant I needed to get there immediately. When I reached the lobby, the bellhop from earlier caught sight of me and flinched like I was a tax auditor. I ambled over. Say, I said pleasantly, remember how you saw that girl in the blue coat? I might need one more favour. He paled. You know about what happened? I know there's a commotion, and I know you want to help a good citizen uphold justice. I want to keep my job, he muttered. You will, I assured him. All I need is a door held open at the right time. His hesitation lasted 2 seconds before his survival instincts folded like bad dough. He jerked his head toward the service hall. Kitchen, oven room. But if anyone asks, no one will ask, I said. You look too innocent. He looked insulted, which was fine by me and let me slip past. I could tell I was getting close before I even turned the corner. The hallway smelled like burned sugar, hot metal, and fear. When I reached the oven room, I found 2 uniforms stationed outside like they were guarding Fort Knox. Luckily, uniformed cops are creatures of habit, and one had stepped around the corner to argue with someone over a clipboard. The other was distracted by Pearly Stebbins hollering from inside. Pearly sounded like someone had just told him his steak should be medium well. I waited for the precise second the standing officer looked left. Then I slid right in. The oven room was a cramped steel chamber that had seen better decades. Heat wafted off the tiles in slow, miserable waves. A group of officers hunched around one of the industrial proofing ovens, the kind designed to keep dough warm, not people dead. Pearly Stebbins stood near the door, shirt plastered to his back with sweat, face flushed with an expression halfway between outrage and constipation. He spotted me instantly and barked, "Goodwin! What the—" "If it helps," I said. "I didn't hear Kramer tell me to stay away." "That doesn't help." Pearly stomped toward me like a bull convinced the red cape had insulted its mother. But before he could toss me out, something on the floor caught my eye. The victim, Philip Montrose, hotel bookkeeper, quiet sort, according to Lila, lay sprawled on the tile like yesterday's laundry. His shirt was scorched at the sleeves and collar. His hair was singed, his hands— good God! His hands bore the marks of someone who had scraped and clawed and fought for air. Pearly grunted beside me. He was alive when they shoved him in. "How do you know?" "That latch." He pointed with a knuckle, unwilling to touch anything. He scratched the hell out of it. Someone held the damn door shut. I crouched, mindful not to touch evidence. The scuff marks on the latch told the story Pearly didn't want to repeat. Montrose had fought for dear life. "Where's his ring?" I said. "Ring?" "Emerald signet ring, worn on his right hand. According to a witness." Pearly scowled. "You get your information from the Tooth Fairy." "Better source." "Well, we didn't find any ring." That was interesting. The killer either took it or Montrose lost it in the struggle. I scanned the room. My instincts nudged me toward a splintered bit of wood lying near a metal tray. I picked it up, careful to hold the edge only. "Broken spoon," I said. "Wooden. Smells like almond paste." Pearly groaned. "Goodwin, I swear. I'm not taking it. Calm your badge." Another officer bagged it while shooting me a suspicious look. I ignored him and sniffed the air again. Perfume. Not Lila's light, floral scent. This was heavier, more expensive, with a spicy finish. Whoever had been here last wasn't a cake decorator. Before I could follow that line of thought, the door slammed behind me. Kramer walked in, cigar clenched between his teeth like it was the only thing holding him together. His hat was pushed back, his tie crooked, and the sweat on his brow was less about heat and more about the kind of trouble that makes bosses yell. He spotted me and shut his eyes briefly, like a man praying for patience he didn't believe in. "Goodwin," he said, opening them again. "I told you to stay away." "You did," I said. "But you know me. I'm like mold, thrives where it's least wanted." A couple of uniforms snorted. Kramer pretended not to hear. He marched over, lowering his voice. "1 minute, that's all I'm giving you. Off the record." That surprised me. Kramer doesn't do off the record unless something's eating at him. Make it count, he growled. I nodded at Montrose. Bookkeeper? Yeah, Philip Montrose. Been with the Imperial 7 years. Too honest to steal a sugar cube. But recently, he gestured helplessly. Rumours, accounting inconsistencies, management getting nervous. Black market ingredient racket, I asked quietly. He squinted. Where'd you hear that? A bird. Your birds need their wings clipped. But am I wrong? Kramer sighed, puffing his cigar. No. Montrose's books show flagged entries, imports that don't add up. Someone upstairs has been pushing for answers. The DA doesn't like the stink on this, especially not with wartime rationing fresh in everyone's memory. Any suspects? All of management, half the kitchen, the bellhops, maybe the pastry chef, hell, maybe the guy who polishes the lobby tables. The pastry chef didn't seem murderous, I said. He did seem capable of violence, but only toward dough. Kramer rubbed his temples. Just what I needed. Goodwin's comedy hour. I leaned in. Inspector, Montrose saw something. Or someone saw him see something. You know nothing, he retorted. I know he didn't die instantly. Those scratch marks. Yeah, he waved me off. The ME will confirm. Now get out before I book you for obstruction. Would you? Not today, he admitted grudgingly. I don't have the patience. That was as close to affectionate as Kramer got. I stepped back. You want Wolfe's help? No, he said firmly, but I want him not to interfere unless he knows something solid. And you tell him this. If he sticks his nose in without evidence, I'll come down on him with the DA's full weight. I'll pass it along with proper dramatic flair. He grunted. Don't you ever get tired of letting Wolfe use you like a chess piece? Sure, I said lightly. But I'm the knight. I get to move in fun patterns. Kramer actually huffed a laugh, one single begrudging puff of air. Then he jerked his thumb toward the door. Go, before Stebbins drags you out by your collar. I didn't need to be told twice. I slipped out before Pearlie noticed. Outside, the hallway felt cooler, though not by much. I needed air, answers, and Wolfe. I hit the sidewalk just as a cab splashed through a puddle, missing me by an inch. The city roared around me, honks, footsteps, shouts, and beneath it all the faint metallic hum of trouble brewing. By the time I reached the brownstone, lunch was almost ready. Fritz appeared at the office doorway exactly on schedule. Lunch is prepared, he said. Mr. Wolfe is waiting. Then I'd better deliver the news before he declares the world too vexing to eat. Inside, Wolfe sat behind his desk, massive and regal, fingers steepled like an unimpressed deity. Well? He demanded. I told him everything. Montrose, the oven, the scratches, the perfume, the missing ring, Kramer's warnings. Wolfe closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, then released it in a single word, dripping disdain. Phooey. Exactly, I said. What now? He opened his eyes. Now, Archie, we proceed with caution. You have already risked arrest. Do not compound your recklessness. That's me, I said, reckless with style. He glared, which meant he was worried. Then he rang the bell for lunch, which meant the conversation was over. And that was the ritual closure for the scene. The kind of knock that rattled the front door at 3:14 that afternoon wasn't one we got from friends, salesmen, or even Kramer. It was the knock of someone whose nerves were frayed enough to use their fist like a telegraph operator pounding out a distress call. I'd barely risen from my chair when Fritz appeared, not from the kitchen doorway as usual, but from the hallway behind me, face pale as unwhipped cream. That alone was enough to tell me the day was about to take another sharp curve. Archie, he whispered, she is here. Who? Oh, no need for further details. Only one she had Fritz looking like a man watching souffle collapse before his eyes. I moved to the hall just as the front door opened, and there she stood, Lila Arden in her blue coat, eyes wide, hands trembling around the collar as if holding herself together by the seams. The girl looked like she'd run from a fire only to land in a blizzard. When she saw me, relief washed across her face so quickly it was almost a shock to see she had any left. Archie, she breathed, please. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside for her to enter. You picked a good address. We're famous for hospitality, orchids, and heartburn from responsibility. She didn't smile, just clutched her coat and stepped inside. Fritz hovered at her elbow like a guardian angel armed with garlic butter and uncompromising standards. "Come on," I said gently, guiding her toward the office. "He's in." Inside, Wolfe was seated behind his desk, mountainous and immovable, hands steepled under his chin. His eyes lifted the moment we entered, and even he couldn't disguise the faint eyebrow hitch when he saw Lila trembling in the doorway. "Miss Arden," he said, voice calm as chilled cream, "you are distressed." She swallowed. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe, I—" Her voice broke and she pressed both hands to her mouth. Wolfe flicked his eyes toward me. I took the cue and guided her to the red leather chair opposite him. She perched on the edge, shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. "Fritz," Wolfe commanded quietly. Fritz stepped forward. "Yes, sir?" "Bring her a glass of water, no ice." "Yes, sir." Lila watched Fritz leave, then turned to Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm being followed." "By whom?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know, but someone has been watching the hotel corridors. I saw a shadow outside my apartment door. And now Montrose. Montrose is dead." Her voice cracked again. Wolfe raised a hand, a subtle command for calm. "Miss Arden," he said, "you are safe here. No harm will befall you while you sit in this room." Protection from Wolfe isn't a small promise. It's like being told by a glacier that nothing will crush you today. Fritz returned with the water. She drank it quickly, almost desperately. "I don't have money," she whispered. Wolfe closed his eyes, pained, not by her plight, but by the insult to his profession. "You should have led with that. It spares me the false hope of compensation." "Wolfe," I said, leaning against the desk corner, "don't scare her off before she tells you the part where we all get rich." He lifted one eyelid. "Archie, please be still." Lila twisted her hands. "I'm sorry. I need help. And when I met Fritz, he seemed like someone I could trust, someone who knows good men." Fritz, standing a few respectful feet behind her, flushed red to the ears. I'd never seen that before. Wolfe noticed too, his eyes softened by a millimeter. "I see." Wolfe sighed, then addressed Lila. "If you cannot pay a retainer, you must compensate us with absolute and uncompromised honesty. Half-truths, omissions, or embellishments will end all assistance immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then speak." She inhaled shakily. "Montrose, the bookkeeper, he wasn't just skimming from the hotel accounts. He was skimming from the black market vanilla stocks, a wartime shipment that never made the books. Someone higher up found out." Wolfe's eyebrows twitched. The black market ingredient racket was no amateur playground. She continued, voice trembling but steadying with each sentence. "I overheard Montrose arguing with someone in the lower kitchen hallway. They thought I'd gone home. They were shouting about missing shipments, coded orders, and a ledger that didn't match. Then Montrose said something about exposure and being done taking the fall." "What happened next?" Wolfe asked. I turned to leave, quietly. I didn't want them to know I was still there. But then," she shuddered, "I heard footsteps. A struggle. Someone grabbed Montrose. I heard the proofing oven door slam, and when I looked—" She covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Take your time," I said. She nodded shakily. "I saw someone shove him inside. I didn't see their face, only a sleeve, grey, wool, like the management staff wear, and the cufflink, gold, with a lion embossed on it." That perked Wolfe up like a cat hearing a can opener. "A lion? You are certain?" "Yes." "Grey wool and lion cufflinks. Nice mix of subtlety and arrogance." "Which manager wears such accessories?" Wolfe asked. "The general manager has them," she whispered. "They're from London, a gift from his father. He wears them all the time." "Yet," I cut in, "you flinched harder when I mentioned the assistant manager yesterday, which suggests he's part of this somehow." Her eyes darted to me, frightened. I don't know. Maybe I was mistaken." She was lying, badly, but not out of deceit, out of fear. Wolfe noticed too. "Miss Arden," he said sharply, "you promised honesty." It wasn't the assistant manager. It couldn't be." "Why not?" Wolfe pressed. She froze, then lowered her head. Because he once warned me, quietly. He told me to stay out of the basement corridors after midnight. He said nothing good happened down there." "That," I said, Sounds more like protection than conspiracy. She looked torn. Or a setup, Wolfe added. Her breath hitched. Then I don't know anything anymore. Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. Miss Arden, the danger pursuing you is real. Montrose's death was no accident. The thefts are part of something organized, likely involving both management and outside suppliers. If someone believes you saw enough to imperil them, you may indeed be in mortal peril. She trembled violently. But, Wolfe continued, I will not take your case under false pretenses. Therefore, were you followed today? Yes, she whispered. A man in a grey overcoat trailed me 3 blocks. I ducked into a deli and out the back. Did he pursue? I don't know. Wolfe exhaled slowly, a sound almost like a growl of disapproval directed toward whoever had put this fear in her. Very well, he said. I will accept the case, for a reduced fee, payable when you are able. Mr. Wolfe, she gasped, thank you. Do not thank me. Thank Fritz. Wolfe gestured at him. He is the reason I tolerate this departure from my standards. Fritz's eyes shone with gratitude, and something fiercer, protective. I stepped forward. So what's my part in all this? To be useful, Wolfe said. You will tail members of the hotel's managerial staff, quietly, discreetly, and you will report everything with accuracy. Hazard pay? I asked casually. You already cost me enough, he replied with the withering calm of a man assessing a particularly irresponsible teenager. You will not request more. Worth a try. A faint, reluctant twitch tugged at Wolfe's mouth, the closest he gets to humouring me in front of company. Next, Wolfe said, tugging the bell cord, we shall require Mr. Pantzer. Saul? I asked. That's serious? Evidently, Wolfe said. Miss Arden's account suggests intricacy and danger, and I will not have you blundering into peril alone. Touched, I said, deeply. He ignored that. Fritz disappeared to fetch Saul. Lila sat silently, gathering the courage she'd just spilled all over Wolfe's carpet. I leaned toward her. You did well, I said quietly, and for what it's worth, Wolfe being kind is like spotting a unicorn, except the unicorn complains its chair is too hard. She let out a small, shaky laugh. Is it always like this here? Only on Tuesdays, I said, and days ending in Y. Wolfe harumphed. Archie, enough. Yes, sir. He turned to Lila. You may remain in the house until Mr. Pantzer arrives. No harm will come to you while you're in my care. That was Wolfe's version of a knight drawing a sword. Not flashy, but final. At that moment, Fritz reappeared at the doorway. Saul is on his way, sir. Good, Wolfe said. Prepare a small tray for Miss Arden. Tea. Nothing rich. Yes, sir. Lila looked like she might cry again. Not from fear this time, but from relief. Thank you, she whispered. Wolfe waved a hand. Archie, when Saul arrives, brief him. Then begin your assignments. I wish to hear nothing more until you have something useful. That was the ritual closing. Clear, clean, decisive. I nodded, grabbed my hat, and flashed Lila a reassuring wink. Don't worry, I said. You're in the safest place in Manhattan, and the most stubborn. Wolfe snorted. Out. I left with a grin. If you've never walked through the underbelly of a luxury Manhattan hotel during peak service, imagine stepping into a symphony orchestra where every instrument is sharp, steaming, and liable to cut you if you don't keep tempo. At 10:06 the next morning, Saul Panzer and I were slipping into the Imperial Hotel's service entrance like 2 stagehands sneaking backstage during opening night. The air hit me first, roasting meats, boiling chocolate, citrus glaze, copper pans warming on burners. It smelled like heaven trying to kill you with calories. Saul tipped his flat cap in a hello to the nearest dishwasher. Saul has a way of blending into scenery the way a shadow blends into the floor. If invisibility ever became a marketable profession, Saul would open a school. Busy crowd today, I murmured as we entered the main service corridor. Saul sniffed. Nervous crowd, too. He wasn't wrong. The pastry staff were clustered together like sparrows on a telephone wire right before a storm. They whispered in tight little bursts, eyes darting to the corners like they expected the ovens to start confessing crimes. If nervous pastry chefs ever formed a choir, this was their first rehearsal. I nudged Saul. Think any of them want to audition for solo terrified soprano? Try the sous chef, Saul muttered. The sous chef in question was a wiry man with sharp elbows and a voice like a cleaver. He swung a ladle with the kind of aggression usually reserved for street brawls. I edged in his direction. Morning, I said brightly. Heard you folks are hiring. He didn't bother looking up. We're not. Shame, I said. I do good work with sugar, especially when someone's life depends on it. The ladle froze mid-air. I leaned in just enough to be annoying. Montrose ring a bell? His throat bobbed. He lowered the ladle. I don't know anything about that. Great, I said. Then you won't mind telling me what he was doing having secret hallway meetings with Eleanor Vale. He stiffened. Saul moved closer, quiet as dust. The sous chef's eyes darted sideways. I shouldn't say. You just did, I pointed out. Let's hear the rest. He exhaled like he was letting out a year's worth of tension. Montrose met her twice, maybe 3 times. Said she wanted special cakes for a charity gala. But, he hesitated, he also asked her for money, for ingredients, imports. Black market imports, I asked. He flinched. You didn't hear it from me. Relax, I said. I don't put kitchen staff on witness stands. You've already been helpful. He wiped sweat from his forehead. That's all I know, honest. Good, I said. Now keep your eyes open and your mouth shut, in that order. We left him trembling over a pot of chocolate ganache. Saul murmured, He's scared. He should be, I said, but not of us. We moved deeper into the service hallways until Saul tugged my sleeve. You go upstairs. I want to check something. What? He tilted his chin toward a sack of flour leaning against a pantry door. Something's off. Saul had the instincts of a bloodhound armed with a calculator. If he thought a flour sack looked suspicious, it probably had a body in it, or at least a clue that would disrupt someone's morning. You poke around down here, I told him. I'll go charm a society matron. Eleanor Vale's penthouse was the kind of place that made you wonder if luxury was taxable by the square foot. The carpets were so thick I felt guilty stepping on them. Large windows framed mid-town like a painting someone had ordered specially. When the door opened, she appeared in a swirl of silk and perfume, elegant enough to make you forget she was one heartbeat away from snapping like a breadstick. Mr. Goodwin, she said with brittle politeness, what an unexpected occurrence. Ma'am, I said, tipping my hat. Thanks for seeing me. I just needed a moment of your time about Philip Montrose. She stiffened. I told the police everything I knew. I'm not the police, I said gently. I'm more polite and less fond of paperwork. She stepped aside. Very well. Come in. The penthouse interior looked like a magazine spread dedicated to the theme, old money trying not to sweat. A piano sat in the corner, surrounded by fresh-cut orchids. Wolfe would have approved, even if he'd muttered about their variety. We sat in a pair of cream-coloured chairs. Eleanor smoothed her skirt. You asked about Montrose, she said. Yes, he approached me. He asked me to finance a special acquisition. Special how? Imported ingredients, she said. Rare, costly. He hinted they required discreet channels. I said no. He take the rejection well? No, she admitted. He seemed desperate. That fit. A man dipping into black market stock and trying to climb out of a financial hole by borrowing from the rich. That was an avalanche waiting to happen. My eyes drifted to her wrists. She wore gold cufflinks, lion embossed, attached to a velvet housecoat. I leaned forward. Those cufflinks, I said casually. Family heirlooms. Yes, she said proudly. My grandfather brought them from London. They're quite distinctive. Velvet sleeves, though, I said. Soft, blue-black. Hard to confuse with grey wool. She blinked, momentarily thrown. What are you implying? Nothing, I said sincerely. Actually, I'm clearing you. Her shoulders relaxed, too quickly. A reaction worth filing. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I stood. If you think of anything else, anything Montrose said, anyone he feared, call me. She gave a nod that meant she absolutely wouldn't. As I left, I made a mental note. The cufflinks were a red herring, but the panic under her poise wasn't. Back in the hotel's service corridors, Saul appeared at the end of the hall, carrying something wrapped in a kitchen towel. Find a turkey? I asked. Ledger, he said simply. I whistled low. In a flour bin? Yes, hidden under 10 pounds of it. He handed it to me. Coded entries, not hotel accounts, cartel numbers. The Silver Cartel, I murmured. Saul nodded. Montrose was paying them, or they were paying him, hard to tell yet. Any names? One, Saul said, initials only, SP. Silent partner, I murmured. According to pastry gossip. Saul nodded again. Also, someone else skimmed from the cartel shipments, not Montrose. Who? Not sure yet. We shared a look. Someone clever was double-dipping the black market stocks, and Montrose had been caught between two sides like a walnut in a nutcracker. I'll take this to Wolfe, I said. He'll love decoding it. Gives him purpose before dinner. As we walked back toward the street, Saul said, You talked to Eleanor? Yes. She involved? No, I said. But she's scared enough to know more than she said. Outside, the air was crisp, with that pre-lunch bustle Manhattan specializes in. I hailed a cab. Saul tipped his hat. I'll keep looking. Do that, I said. If you find anyone wearing grey wool sleeves and gold lions, call me before tackling them. He smirked. I don't tackle, I maneuver. Save some maneuvering for the finale. He melted into the street crowd, gone like smoke. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was seated at his desk, a glass of beer waiting on the tray, his post-noon indulgence. He eyed me as I entered. Well? He demanded. I dropped the ledger onto his blotter. Montrose had friends, or enemies, or both. Saul found this in the flour. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. A ledger. Coded. Yes, from the Silver Cartel. He tapped the cover. I shall examine it. And, I added, we interviewed Eleanor Vale. Indeed. She has the cufflinks, gold, lion, but velvet sleeves. She's not our grey wool phantom. But she was nervous. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Of guilt? Of something. He began flipping through the ledger pages. This is excellent, Archie. A significant development. I blinked. Wolfe praising me was rarer than Fritz burning a sauce. Well, I said lightly, I aim to please. You seldom aim, Wolfe muttered, yet sometimes you hit the mark. I beamed. Wolfe glared, but not convincingly. He rang the bell. Fritz appeared in the doorway instantly. Yes, sir? Lunch, Wolfe said. We must not let chaos erode our schedule. Yes, sir. I took my seat opposite Wolfe as Fritz disappeared. Wolfe's eyes returned to the ledger. Tension hovered in the air like steam from a pot. A cartel ledger, a dead bookkeeper, a frightened young woman, a silent partner, lion cufflinks, grey sleeves, pieces waiting for Wolfe to assemble. I leaned back, hands behind my head. Think we've stirred enough pots? Wolfe didn't look up. Archie, this is only the beginning. Fritz appeared at the doorway again, signal that lunch was ready, and that ended the scene with our ritual closure. If there's one thing you can count on in this world, besides Wolfe's hatred for early appointments and Fritz's insistence on fresh herbs, it's that trouble arrives in clusters, like olives dumped from a jar. At 11:43 the next morning, I was in the office typing up notes Wolfe hadn't asked for, purely to irritate him, when the phone rang with the grim punctuality of a funeral bell. Wolfe raised an eyebrow at me like the noise itself was an insult to his lineage. I answered. Nero Wolfe's residence, Archie Goodwin speaking, purveyor of charm, information, and the occasional inconvenient truth. Kramer's voice came through, low and scraped raw. Goodwin. He didn't bark it. He said it, which meant the day was about to pitch us all into a ditch. Inspector, I said lightly, calling for a morning chat. Listen, Kramer interrupted, his tone flat as cold asphalt. Tell Wolfe a second body just dropped at the Imperial. My fingers froze over the typewriter keys. Who? I asked. Anthony Greer, he said, assistant manager, found in the walk-in freezer, dead as ice. That wiped the smirk off even my imagination. Greer, the one Lila had defended, then feared mentioning, the one who had warned her nothing good happens after midnight. What happened to him? I asked. Get Wolfe on the line. He's right here, I said, and held out the receiver. Wolfe scowled like the phone was requesting he do manual labour, then took it with 2 fingers. "This is Wolfe." There was a pause on the other end, then Kramer said, Greer's throat was bruised, violently, one cufflink missing. He was shoved into the freezer sometime before 10 this morning. Wolfe's face darkened by degrees. "And you require what?" "What I require," Kramer snapped, "is for Goodwin to stay out of the way. But I already know that's a lost cause, so if he's coming, and we both know he will, he can come with me. I don't want him getting himself arrested for trespassing." Wolfe's jaw flexed. "Inspector, must you always presume mania on my part? You're the only citizen in Manhattan who thinks restraint means waiting until after lunch. Goodwin meets me at the Imperial Service entrance, and Wolfe—" "Yes?" Kramer hesitated. "Greer had a scheduled appointment today with a private consultant. When we checked his notes, that was you." Wolfe's expression barely moved, but his eyes sharpened. "I see." "See that your man gets here in 10 minutes, Kramer said, and hung up. Wolfe lowered the receiver like it had personally betrayed him. His hands settled on the armrests, fingers tensing. "Archie." "Yes?" "Go." "Thought you'd never say it." "And while you are there," Wolfe's voice dipped quieter, "exercise caution. Whoever is doing this is desperate." That was Wolfe for "don't get killed." I tipped my hat and left. The Imperial's back corridor was buzzing with uniforms, crime scene techs, and enough cold air from the freezer to turn a brass monkey blue. Kramer met me just outside the open double doors. His cigar stuck out from his mouth at an angle that suggested it had wronged him personally. "Goodwin," he grunted. "I came running," I said. "Didn't even stop for a snack." "Miracle," he jerked his head. "Inside." I followed him in. The freezer was easily 30 feet long, with metal shelves lining the walls and a chill that bit through your coat like frozen teeth. Greer lay on the floor near the shelving, his face pale, mouth slightly open, eyes staring at the condensation gathering on the ceiling. I didn't know him well, but I knew he hadn't deserved a death like that. Pearlie Stebbins stood nearby, writing notes with the force of a man stabbing a steak. "Don't touch anything," he growled without looking at me. "If I wanted frostbite," I said, "I'd take a vacation in Antarctica." Kramer nudged a tech aside. "Look." I knelt, staying outside the chalk markers. Greer's collar was torn, bruises circling his throat like someone had tried to throttle him before finishing the job with temperature. "Neck injury before the freezer," I observed. "Yeah." Kramer's voice was gritty. "Me says strangulation attempts. Killer probably meant to knock him out cold and shove him in." A charming individual. I shifted my weight and leaned down further. Greer's right coat pocket was torn. Near the tear, faint dust shimmered under the light. I dipped a finger, carefully so the cops didn't throw me out, and brought it closer. Silver dust, the same kind Saul had found on the ledger page edges. "Well, well," I murmured. Greer was handling more than ledgers. Kramer sighed heavily. "There's more." He pointed with his cigar to a strip of paper by Greer's left hand. I used the eraser end of a pencil from Pearlie's kit, with his grudging permission, to flip it. A scrap of heavy cardstock, gold trimming, embossed letters, a charity gala invitation. "Eleanor Vales?" I asked. "Probably," Kramer said. "We'll confirm." I glanced around. "Footprints?" "Yeah, there." Pearlie pointed to the frost near the door. "Size 12. Expensive shoe. Italian. Only one set coming in, none going out." "So the killer walked backward out of the freezer?" I asked. "Either that," Kramer grunted, "or he got carried out by his conscience." We both knew it wasn't the latter. I stood and folded my arms. Greer had an appointment with Wolfe, means he was reaching for help. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You think he was the silent partner you mentioned yesterday?" "Fitz," I said. "He warned Lila. He had access to the kitchens. He might have been skimming the cartel shipments behind Montrose's back." "Then why kill him?" I rubbed my jaw. "Because the killer is someone higher up, someone running the operation, someone who knew Greer was about to talk." "And Wolfe was the man he wanted to talk to," Kramer muttered, "which means someone might think Wolfe knows more than he does." I didn't like the sound of that. "Look," Kramer said, voice quieter, "I don't like admitting this, but if Wolfe has any insight, I want it. Just don't let him stomp all over my scene. Got it?" "Inspector," I said, placing a hand over my heart, I am always respectful of scene boundaries. Pearlie snorted. Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. You'd look good in pearls, I told him. Kramer pinched the bridge of his nose. Goodwin, out, before I remember how to file harassment charges. I obeyed, mostly because Wolfe's fuming was waiting for me at home, and I didn't want to miss that show. When I stepped back into the brownstone, the atmosphere was thicker than Fritz's best gravy. Wolfe sat rigid behind his desk, jaw locked, eyes sharp enough to peel potatoes. The moment he saw me, he snapped. Well? Greer is dead, I said simply. I am aware, Wolfe growled. Kramer called again, briefly, in his fashion. He said fashion like it was a foul ingredient that had spoiled a stew. I moved to the centre of the office and delivered the report. Bruised throat, missing cufflink, silver dust, the gala invitation scrap, the footprint, the failed appointment with Wolfe. When I finished, Wolfe's massive hands folded slowly, deliberately like boulders settling. Greer, he said softly, was reaching toward me. I should have foreseen it. You're not clairvoyant, I said. You're just annoyingly perceptive. There's a limit. Wolfe glared. Archie, I do not indulge self-recrimination, and I do not require you to coddle me. Wasn't coddling, just stating facts. He exhaled sharply. Pfui. He shifted in his chair, irritation radiating from him like heat off a boiler. Greer was not the murderer. He was silenced. Yes, I said, because he knew something, or someone thought he did. Wolfe drummed his fingers once, and now suspicion will fall on the wrong people. Lila, I said. And, Wolfe added grimly, Fritz. That hit like a hammer. Fritz? Why Fritz? She came to him, Wolfe said, and the police in their graceless tendencies may seize upon that. We must act. Fritz being dragged into police suspicion would be enough to make Wolfe declare war on the DA's office, and win. What do you need? I asked. Lon Cohen, Wolfe said, immediately, before the press invents idiocy. Consider him summoned. And Archie, Wolfe said, softer than before, do not take foolish risks. Whoever is killing has proven capable. Worried about me? I grinned. I am irritated enough without having to replace you, Wolfe replied stiffly. Then after a pause, I overstated my displeasure earlier. Your efforts are adequate. I put a hand to my chest. High praise. Stop, you'll make me blush. Wolfe gave me a glare that could have cleaned rust, but the edge wasn't sharp. Underneath it was something else, a quiet, grudging protectiveness he'd die before naming. At that moment the office bell rang, Fritz at the door, announcing tea. It was the ritual signal that the scene was at its end. Wolfe straightened in his chair. Archie, bring Cohen, immediately. Yes, sir. I turned toward the door, already planning our next move, because now the stakes had risen, the killer was cornered, and someone was getting desperate. Desperate killers are always the most trouble, and that meant things were about to get interesting. If there's a place in Manhattan where crime can waltz in a tuxedo and nobody blinks, it's a charity gala. At 8:17 that night, the Art Deco ballroom of the Astoria Imperial glittered like a beehive dipped in champagne. Light spilled from chandeliers shaped like frozen waterfalls. The band purred out a smooth foxtrot, and every guest smiled the kind of smile that usually precedes a generous donation or a felony. I walked in with a fresh shine on my shoes and a suspicion hanging over my shoulder like a tailored overcoat. Wolfe had drafted me, Saul Panzer, and Fred Durkin into undercover duty, which would have been impressive, except Wolfe's idea of undercover meant we wore decent suits and didn't announce our employers. Wolfe, of course, stayed in the brownstone, issuing orders like a general allergic to fresh air. I scanned the ballroom. Eleanor Vale, radiating society polish, held court near the champagne fountain. To the left, a row of donors clustered around glass cases displaying miniature sugar sculptures shaped like swans, someone's idea of high art. And at the far end stood Victor Hale, general manager of the Imperial, dressed in a grey wool suit so sharp it could have sliced bread. He's here, Saul muttered beside me, barely moving his lips. I see him, I murmured, looking smug enough to be innocent or guilty or both. Saul slipped away like a cat following a scent. Fred Durkin lumbered behind a pillar near the kitchen hallway, where hotel staff darted through swinging doors like bees ferrying pollen. I headed toward Eleanor Vale, threading through the crowd with my best I belong here grin. She brought her champagne flute to her lips, looking like the cover of a magazine titled Money Talks, Lies Walk. "Mr. Goodwin," she said lightly, though her fingers tensed around the glass. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "I enjoy any evening where I can dress up and not get shot at," I said. "So far, we're ahead." A brittle laugh. "I see you're still investigating." "You see correctly. I'm told accuracy is fashionable this season." Her eyes scanned the room, always returning to someone near the balcony. Tall, sharp suit, keeping his face angled away. Interesting. "Tell me something," I said casually. "Was Hale always this nervous about money?" She stiffened. "Victor Hale is complicated." "Try me." She hesitated, then exhaled. "He gambles, privately, quietly, but not quietly enough. He's been drowning in debt. He asked me for help once." "For imported ingredients?" I asked. "No, for money," she said, "to cover a shortfall." "And you said no?" "Of course I did," she said, too quickly. "It would have been inappropriate," which meant she'd considered it, and maybe more. Another note for the mental filing cabinet. A waiter carrying a tray passed by. Eleanor touched my arm. "Be careful with Victor. He hides desperation behind manners." "That makes two of us," I said. "But only one of us kills accountants." She didn't laugh that time. From the corner of my eye, I saw Hale slip into a restricted pantry corridor behind the bandstand. Saul, lurking nearby in the shadows, watched him go with minimal eyebrow movement. I peeled away from Eleanor. Saul gave a tiny nod. "I'll tail him." I trusted Saul more than gravity, so I let him go. My job was to circulate, mingling like an undercover kumquat. Fred stood across the room near the service hallway, his bulk partially blocking the view of two uniformed bellhops whispering urgently. I strolled to Fred, keeping my face smiling. "Something?" Fred leaned in. "He's in there," he murmured. "Hale's arguing with somebody." "Tone?" "Mean, like knives wrapped in velvet." We edged closer, staying behind a decorative column shaped like a giant gilded feather. From there, the pantry door was visible as a thin slit of golden light. Inside, voices. Hale's first, smooth, restrained, but stained with fear. "You listen to me. I handled the accountant." Montrose. "And I shut up the fool boy." Greer. My scalp tingled. Fred's jaw tightened. Another voice answered, rougher, accented lightly, calm in a way that made it scarier. "That wasn't cartel business. We didn't authorize killings." "I had to," Hale hissed. "They were going to expose me." "Expose your theft," the courier said coldly, "not ours." A pause, the kind of pause that precedes either enlightenment or a stabbing. Hale swallowed audibly. "I did what needed to be done." The courier answered with a sound like a dry chuckle. "You think crime is a hobby, Mr. Hale? You think you can kill people without permission?" Hale stammered. I left messages. I tried to reach—" A slap echoed off the pantry walls. Fred tensed like he wanted to charge in and teach both men that no one slapped people in front of him. "Stay," I whispered. "Cops can break it up later." The courier snarled. "You're a liability. The cartel does not tolerate liabilities." Footsteps. Then both men moved out of sight deeper into the pantry. I signaled Fred to shift positions. "So Hale murdered Montrose and Greer to cover his theft," I said under my breath. "But he ain't the mastermind," Fred rumbled. "Exactly. Somebody else is pulling strings." I returned to the ballroom just in time for the music to shift to a slow, syrupy number. Couples drifted toward the dance floor. I pretended to admire a sugar swan display while scanning for anything emerald or suspicious. Then I saw it. Near the balcony steps, half hidden under the glow of a frosted chandelier, stood a tall, shadowed figure wearing a ring. Not just any ring, a signet ring set with a square-cut emerald. The same one Lila described, the same one tied to Montrose's first coded plea for help. The ring glinted once under the chandelier, like a wink from a conspirator. The figure turned, slipping behind guests, heading for the service exit. Bingo. I set my glass down, murmured an apology to a startled heiress, and followed. The air cooled the further I moved from the ballroom's warmth. The music faded behind me. I strode faster, keeping the emerald flicker in sight. The figure pushed through the service door. I hit it 2 seconds later, into a narrow hallway buzzing with fluorescent lights. Empty, except for the faint echo of footsteps sprinting down the far stairwell. "Hey!" I shouted, because sometimes you have to annoy people into mistakes. Nothing. I barreled down the stairs. On the second landing, the service door slammed shut below. By the time I reached it, the alley outside was empty, save for a delivery truck and a newspaper page fluttering against a lamppost like a wounded bird. Gone. Whoever wore that signet ring had a getaway route planned better than most weddings. My pocket buzzed. Wolfe, of course, I answered. "Good evening, sir. Enjoying the gala from your armchair?" "Archie," he said, slow and dangerous, "you are not to pursue suspects alone in labyrinthine service corridors. You will return to the ballroom immediately." "Sorry," I said, tapping the phone against my ear. "Losing signal." "You are not. Static's terrible," I said loudly. "Must be the Art Deco wiring." "Archie!" "Call you back," I chirped and hung up. I could practically feel him glaring across Burrows. That alone warmed me enough to go back inside. Saul rejoined me at the far end of the ballroom. "Hale vanished," he said. "Ran like a fox who smelled a hound. Something scared him." "Maybe someone with an emerald signet ring," I said. "The real boss is here, and they don't want witnesses." Saul nodded slowly. "This is bigger than kitchen theft." "Yeah," I muttered. "Wolf's going to love it." Fred lumbered over. "Courier left. Hale looked like he might faint." "Good," I said. An honest faint would improve his character. The ballroom's glow felt different now. Colder. Sharper. The chandeliers no longer sparkled. They glared. The sugar swans looked like suspects waiting to melt. Somewhere in that glittering crowd stood a killer with a very expensive ring and very unpleasant habits. And their next move was coming. The gala buzzed around us, all glamour on the surface and rot underneath. A perfect motif, Wolfe would say, and he'd be right. I straightened my tie, ready for the next punch. If you've never seen Nero Wolfe decide the world must come to him, you've never seen genuine imperial authority exercised from a yellow chair. At 10:04 the next morning, Wolfe sat with the rigidity of a monument that had lost all patience with the pigeons of humanity. In front of him lay the silver cartel ledger, Hale's contradictory statements, the gala fiasco, and my report on the disappearing emerald ring phantom. And Wolfe was done waiting. "Archie," he said, tapping a finger once against the desk blotter, "call Inspector Kramer. Request his presence at once." That was the tone of a man who didn't request anything. I called anyway. Kramer answered on the third ring with a growl so low it could have vibrated the phone line. "This better not be another wild goose case, Goodwin." "No goose," I said. "A wolf. He wants you here. Says it's urgent." Long exhale. "Fine, but if he's guessing wildly again, I'll have his orchids subpoenaed as material witnesses." "Tell him that yourself," I said, hanging up. Wolfe muttered, "Impertinence," but he didn't sound offended. In his world, that counted as affection. At 10:42, Kramer arrived at the brownstone door, looking as if he'd been wrestling a newspaper headline all morning. Fritz led him in, maintaining a politeness that almost hid his worry for Lila, who remained upstairs out of sight. Kramer planted himself in front of Wolfe's desk. "All right, Wolfe. You pulled me from a DA meeting. Make it count." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Inspector, I regret interrupting any endeavor that keeps you from harassing innocent citizens, but we have a mutual problem." "Oh, good," Kramer said, dropping into a chair. "This again." Wolfe raised an eyebrow, not high, just enough to convey aristocratic annoyance. 2 murders, a black market distribution network, a frightened witness, and a disappearing culprit wearing an emerald signet ring. We are no longer playing in the shallows. Kramer rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The hotel is stonewalling. Half the staff's scared stiff, the other half is lying, and Hale, blast him, keeps talking in circles. And don't get me started on Eleanor Vale's lawyers." His cigar twitched like a restless snake. "So talk, Wolfe. What's your theory?" Wolfe glanced at me. "Archie." I took the opening. "Montrose skimmed product. Greer skimmed from Montrose, Hale skimmed from the hotel and the cartel, and Eleanor Vale," I paused. Kramer's eyes sharpened, "is mixed up in ways she pretends not to be." Kramer let out a grunt. "You're accusing a society queen of running a smuggling ring?" "No," I said. "I'm accusing her of leading one." Kramer's cigar nearly fell out of his mouth. "You're kidding." Wolfe leaned forward. "The ledger contains initials. EV. notated on 2 supply routes and 1 payout column. Eleanor Vale's charity orders used the same suppliers tied to the cartel's ingredient diversions, and Montrose went to her for an acquisition request. She declined payment, officially, but unofficially, she had every reason to silence him before he exposed the laundering system. Kramer's face scrunched. And Hale? An opportunist, Wolfe said. He lacked subtlety. He stole quantities he thought would go unnoticed. Vale needed him quiet, but Hale acted too soon without permission. Montrose died because Hale panicked. Greer died because Hale thought he saw a loose thread. And now Hale is terrified because the cartel wants him erased. Kramer slapped a hand on his knee. So why isn't Vale cleaning up loose ends herself? I answered. Because she's too busy pretending to be the grieving patroness. Crime is easier when it wears silk. Kramer stared at the ceiling. Blast it, Wolfe. You may have something. Of course he does, I said helpfully. He keeps me around to report his genius back to him. Wolfe shot me a glower that could have melted ice. Archie kindly refrained from commentary. Kramer stood. So what now? Wolfe folded his hands again. We summon all relevant parties. Hale, Eleanor Vale, the pastry staff, the management officers, and the courier whom Saul has already traced. Kramer blinked. You want them here, in this house? Indeed, for a deductive presentation. You mean one of your blasted parlour tricks, Kramer muttered, but he sank back down, resigned. Fine, I'll allow it, but I want a full squad outside. If any of them tries to run, they will not, Wolfe said, certainty smooth as butter. Mr. Goodwin will ensure order. Me? I gestured at myself. What am I, the bouncer for gourmet criminals? Wolfe didn't blink. You are swift, observant, and capable of physical intervention if required. Sir, I said, you're flirting with me. Archie, I grinned. He scowled, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Barely. Fine, I said. I'll deliver the invitations. Saul, Fred, and I hit the streets like 3 very different kinds of salesmen peddling trouble. First stop, Victor Hale's office. He opened the door with the expression of a man awaiting execution. Goodwin, he croaked. What do you want? To invite you to a social gathering, I said, handing him Wolfe's formal summons. Wear your best lie. You'll need it. Sweat beaded instantly on his forehead. His hands shook. His eyes darted toward the hallway like he expected armed men to burst through. I don't understand. You will. 6 o'clock. Don't be late, or the police escort will be less polite than I am. He swallowed hard enough to bob his tie knot. As we left, Fred murmured, He's cracking. He's already cracked, I said. We're watching the pieces rearrange themselves. Next, the pastry assistant. He turned pale but accepted the invitation. Do I have to come? He whispered. Yes, I said, but bring your spine. It'll be useful. Then the courier, a wiry man with eyes like a cornered fox. Saul delivered his summons with a single nod. The courier pocketed it silently, jaw clenched. Finally, Eleanor Vale. Her penthouse door opened with chilly elegance. Mr. Goodwin, she said, stepping aside. To what do I owe? This, I said, handing her Wolfe's card. You're invited. She read it. Her fingers stiffened. A meeting? With all parties? That's right. Dress carefully. It may be your last chance to impress. Her eyes flashed something sharp, almost dangerous, before smoothing back into composure. I see, she murmured. I'll attend. As the door closed, Saul leaned toward me. She knew this was coming. Yep, I said. I just don't know if she's scared or planning her counter-strike. Both, Saul guessed. He wasn't off by much. We regrouped at the brownstone. Wolfe had spent the last hour constructing a seating grid, diagramming connections and categorizing motives like a librarian sorting books with explosive bindings. At 3:56, Kramer returned, sleeves rolled, jaw set. Everyone in position outside. Stebbins has the street. 2 men at the alley. Your circus is ready, Wolfe. I am gratified, Wolfe said. You would be, Kramer grunted. So lay it out for me cleanly. Why Eleanor Vale? Wolfe motioned to the ledger. The coded initials, the emerald ring tied to her family crest, the flow of goods through her charity, Montrose's plea, Hale's fear of her, not the other way around, and Lila's note, help me before he does. A misdirection. The threat came from a woman with power, not a man with panic. Kramer rubbed his jaw. And you're sure Hale isn't the mastermind? Hale is a thief, Wolfe said, but not a strategist. His murders were sloppy, reactive. The emerald ring figure evaded Archie with precision. That required foresight. Eleanor Vale is the only one with the resources, influence, and legacy symbols to match, I added, and she lied with elegance. That's usually a giveaway. Kramer clicked his tongue. Women like her don't break easily. No, Wolfe said, but they crack. And tonight, I will provide the pressure. He turned to me. Archie, you will act as security during the assembly. No one leaves without my consent. Yes, sir, I said. If I get shot, you're paying the hospital bill. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly, irritation tempered with something softer. I prefer you remain unperforated. I smirked. Your concern is noted. Not concern, Wolfe snapped. Efficiency. Sure, I said. Efficiency. He glared. I winked. Our well-worn dance. Kramer stood. All right, I'll wait in the dining room. But Wolfe, this better work. It will, Wolfe said, and as Fritz appeared in the doorway to announce that preparations were complete, I felt the tension in the brownstone coil tighter than a watch spring. The suspects were coming. The mastermind was among them, and Wolfe's trap was ready to snap shut. The first sign that the evening was about to earn a page in my personal scrapbook of insanity was the silence. Real silence. The kind that settles in a room when a dozen people who have every reason to hate one another are forced to inhale the same air. By 6:58 p.m., Wolfe's office looked less like an office and more like a pressure cooker in mahogany. Wolfe sat enthroned behind his desk as if he were preparing to judge a particularly offensive opera. I stood by the globe, hands loose at my sides, ready to spring if anybody tried to turn the brownstone into a shooting gallery. The orchids perfumed the room with that smug, exotic fragrance of theirs. They always smell like they know something I don't, which in this case was probably the killer's identity. They also smelled calm, which was more than could be said for the crowd assembled. Victor Hale pretended to look dignified in his perfect grey suit, but beads of sweat betrayed him. Eleanor Vale perched on the edge of her chair, dressed in black silk, her emerald ring flashing every time she shifted. The pastry assistant clutched his hat like it contained the secrets of life. The courier stood rigid, his jaw clenched, and poor Lila remained just behind Fritz's protective stance near the doorway, looking like a fawn trapped in the lion house. Kramer occupied his usual chair like a man expecting a headache to bloom any moment. He hadn't lit a cigar, probably out of respect for the orchids, but the unlit one twitched between his fingers like it wanted to sabotage the potting soil. Wolfe finally opened the show by leaning back, steepling his fingers, and letting the silence thicken another 10 seconds. He loved opening acts like that, built anticipation. "Thank you," Wolfe said, voice cool as polished stone. "I appreciate your timely attendance. This will not take long." Hale swallowed. The courier shifted. Eleanor Vale didn't blink. Wolfe's eyes swept across the room. "We are here because 3 crimes, the smuggling of restricted goods, 2 murders, and 1 attempted obfuscation, converge upon this establishment and its personnel. I have, with Mr. Goodwin's assistance, reconstructed the chain of events." I resisted bowing, barely. Wolfe gestured toward the ledger on his desk. "The Silver Cartel has used the Imperial Hotel as a distribution point for imported luxury ingredients. Vanilla, chocolate, spices, all tightly controlled in wartime scarcity. Someone within the hotel facilitated this. Someone else manipulated the arrangement for personal gain." Hale stiffened, but so lightly you'd miss it if you weren't trained to see guilt twitch like a nervous eyelid. "Montrose," Wolfe continued, "discovered discrepancies. He attempted to blackmail the individual he believed was solely responsible." Eleanor Vale's fingers tightened around the arm of her chair. "What he did not know," Wolfe said, "was that 2 schemes overlapped. The first, a sanctioned arrangement between the Silver Cartel and a silent partner who laundered funds through philanthropic channels. The second, Mr. Hale's embezzlement, siphoning goods from the cartel's network." Hale's voice trembled. I don't know what—" "Silence," Wolfe commanded, and Hale obeyed. Wolfe continued. "Montrose, thinking he held leverage over the cartel, approached Eleanor Vale with an acquisition request. She rebuffed him publicly. Privately, she assessed the risk he posed. Kramer's eyes flicked to Eleanor. She remained motionless. Meanwhile, Wolfe said, Mr. Hale discovered Montrose's blackmail attempt. Believing Montrose's exposure would reveal his own theft, Hale confronted him. A struggle ensued near the industrial ovens. Montrose died. The gold cufflink Hale wore at the time left a distinctive indent on the oven latch metal. Mr. Goodwin identified the matching scratch on your cufflink. Hale's jaw dropped. It could have been a chef. Wolfe arched an eyebrow. Try again, sir. Kramer grunted. Keep going, Wolfe. Wolfe nodded. Greer, the assistant manager, uncovered Hale's involvement and scheduled a consultation with me. That alone ensured his death. Wolfe's tone turned razor-sharp. Mr. Hale, panicked by the possibility of Greer revealing the truth, killed him in the walk-in freezer. The courier inhaled sharply. Hale trembled. But, Wolfe said, raising a finger, neither murder resolved the cartel's internal threat. His gaze slid to Eleanor Vale. The true mastermind is the organizer who controlled the supply chain through her charity, whose initials appear throughout the ledger, who possesses the emerald signet ring described by witnesses, and who stood to lose the most if the cartel's laundering mechanism collapsed. Eleanor Vale didn't move. She might have been carved from ice. Wolfe went on. Montrose menaced her enterprise. Hale muddied her accounts with theft. Greer threatened exposure by turning to me instead of obeying her network. She planned to eliminate Hale after he served his purpose, and when the gala erupted into disarray, she attempted to flee. Kramer snapped. Wolfe, what proof do you have she's the ringleader? Wolfe gestured toward the ledger again. Carton grease, Inspector. Carton grease identical to the smudges found on the emerald signet ring she now wears. All eyes snapped to Eleanor's hand. She slowly folded her fingers, hiding the ring. That residue, Wolfe said, came from handling a shipment of imported vanilla pods stored in the hotel's lower pantry. Montrose also handled that shipment, as did Hale, but only Lady Vale touched the ledger afterward and left residue on the page corners. Mr. Goodwin photographed the stains. Kramer turned to me. You did? Yes, I said. I have many talents. Photography is one. Baking is not. That got a brief twitch from the pastry assistant. You take your victories where you can get them. Wolfe's voice deepened. Furthermore, the ledger entries marked EV correspond with dates of Eleanor Vale's charity orders. Orders which, when cross-checked, match the cartel's missing inventory. Kramer rose halfway from his seat. Mrs. Vale, stand up. But he was too slow. Eleanor Vale exploded from her chair like a cobra lunging, bolting for the doorway. She moved fast, very fast, but not faster than me. I stepped cleanly into her path, grip catching her wrist. The emerald ring flashed once before I twisted her arm behind her back with just enough force to remind her I wasn't a hat-check boy. She hissed, "Let me go." "Nope," I said. "We're full up on fugitives today." Kramer barreled in from the side, snapping handcuffs on her wrist with a grim efficiency born from years of chasing crooks less elegant than this one. "Eleanor Vale, you're under arrest on suspicion of racketeering, smuggling, and conspiracy to commit murder." She sagged, only a little, as the facade cracked. "You fools," she whispered. "You think you've stopped anything? A network is bigger than one woman." "Maybe," I said, "but we aim to start with one." Kramer turned to Hale. "Victor Hale, stand." Hale tried to look innocent. He failed. Kramer cuffed him too. 2 counts of murder. Save the excuses for the DA. Hale whimpered. She told me. She told you nothing," Eleanor snapped. "You acted like the stupid child you are." "Enough," Kramer said sharply. "Goodwin, step back." I released Hale's arm and returned to my post near the globe. The room felt lighter, like a storm had broken and left us lucky enough to still be standing. Fritz, still shielding Lila, relaxed a fraction. I saw gratitude flicker in his expression, aimed at Wolfe. It wasn't often Fritz let emotion show. He stepped forward. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said quietly, "thank you for protecting her." Wolfe's lips tightened. "Fritz, it was necessary." And Mr. Goodwin handled the physical indignities with his usual panache. I bowed again, twice in one night, rare form for me. Lila stepped closer, voice trembling. Will it be over now?" Wolfe examined her gently, almost fatherly. The danger to you is over. You were brave, Miss Lila. Foolish in moments, but brave. You will not be troubled again." Her eyes welled and she nodded. Kramer, already preparing paperwork in his head, exhaled a sigh that felt 20 pounds heavy. "Good work, Wolfe, damn you." But the words didn't bite. They almost sounded respectful. Wolfe nodded once. "Inspector." Kramer herded his prisoners toward the door. Stebbins entered to assist, glowering, efficient, silent. The parade of justice marched out of the brownstone one suspect at a time. Silence settled again. Wolfe inhaled, then pressed the bell cord. Fritz emerged within seconds. "Beer," Wolfe said, "for Mr. Goodwin as well." It was afternoon, so I didn't object. As Fritz left to fetch the chilled glasses, Wolfe leaned back, massaging his temples. "Phooey," he muttered. "Criminals should be less tiresome." "That's what keeps business booming," I said. He grunted. I added, "You know, I never expected pastry chefs, murderers, and black market vanilla to collide in one case. It makes breakfast feel dangerous." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Archie, spare me." Fritz returned with beer, and Wolfe lifted his glass. "To competence," he said. "To danger avoided," I replied. "And," Wolfe added with a grudging glance my way, "to your continued, unperforated state." I smirked. Flattery will get you everywhere. Wolfe grunted, sipped, and the case, at last, was closed.